Hello and welcome to the Glamptuary podcast, where we talk about the experiential outdoor hospitality industry. I'm your host, Bobby Marsden. We're excited to speak with our guests on this episode who are both from a wonderful organization based in Chicago, Illinois called Sage Outdoor Advisory. Joining us on this episode are President Shari Heilala and Director of Outdoor Resorts, Connor Schwab. In this episode, we'll talk about how Sage Outdoor Advisory supports the experiential outdoor hospitality industry, about the services they provide, about how they help people that are thinking about getting a glamping operation get started, and also about how they help people who have existing operations enhance what they already have. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Shari. Hi, Connor. Thanks so much for joining the Glamptuary podcast.
Hi, Bobby. Thanks for having us.
Well, the honor is all mine. And I say that heartfeltly because it's really refreshing to see in a growing business sector organizations that it seems like what their sole purpose is to really help other people get their dreams launched. And I feel like glamping is such a emerging sector of business. It's misunderstood. People don't necessarily know what it is. That's both, from a consumer standpoint and sometimes from the experiential hospitality standpoint. So it's great to see businesses like yourselves that are there to help clarify that, help get the word out, and then help folks that are looking to potentially launch one of these types of businesses. It's to help them get their ship off the dock. So I thank you guys for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to talking more with you about what you do, the services you offer, and the glamping industry as a whole, because there's a lot happening. And Connor, I was reading through the glamping report that you put together, a very useful tool, and we'll have a link on the podcast so people can see that. But there's some numbers that I saw that were really, really awesome to see. 17 million households took a glamping trip in 2021. That's a lot. But I bet there's a lot more that haven't taken that glamping trip yet. So that's exciting to know there's a lot of growth in place. And what you guys do is kind of help with these feasibility studies to help bring, I think, some clarity, not only for the people that want to start glamping businesses, but also for lenders or other institutions that are going to, help these businesses operate. So this is a great point, I think, for me to turn it over to you guys. Tell me a little bit about both your backgrounds, what got you interested in experiential hospitality, and then also what Sage does. What does Sage offer for people that are looking to take sometimes a new step in life?
Sure. Well, I'm the president and founder of Sage Outdoor Advisory, and I'm an appraiser by trade with a 30-plus year career in it. So I'm a real numbers geek at heart. I worked in all kinds of segments of properties. And probably 18 years ago, I appraised my first campground. And I would say it's the first time that my work really kind of tied back to some of my best childhood memories. I grew up in Wisconsin. We would take our boat and camp on the lake every summer. And if I try to pick one memory that I cherish the most, it was that one. So whenever another campground job came in, at the time I hadn't started my company, I raised my hand because I loved it. I loved the property type. I loved being able to be outside. And when I started my company 12 years ago, I looked for more opportunities to grow on that background. And so we're doing a lot of that. And I'd say the first project that came to my desk was in 2018, and it was a really big RV resort in Arizona. And they wanted to plan a lot of glamping and a big variety of units. And that was kind of the foray. It was fortunate to be there that early on in the U.S. for glamping, at least. It's my passion. It's where I've invested all the resources in my company. And we can talk about what we do maybe after Connor introduces himself, because we've got a good story there on how we met and how he joined the firm as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Shari. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, kind of similar, lots of camping. I had three brothers and spent a lot of time doing different camping trips. went down to California for school and went into the big corporate world in San Francisco and did the corporate thing for a while in the big city, and felt a big soul pull to get into the outdoor industry and start impacting that. And I had a chance to go to a really cool entrepreneurial MBA program in Austin, Texas. And that's where I got to designate my thesis, which was in privatized camping and glamping. So that was 2018. So that was kind of my first foray into the space and starting to look at different business models and the big players and trends that were happening in the industry. Post-graduation, I had a chance to travel to Africa and kind of experience the birthplace of glamping out on the Serengeti. And ended up spending about 4 months traveling all over the continent, looking at different outdoor and experiential hospitality, doing research and development for my own glamping business that I wanted to launch. Came back to the US and did a similar road trip in the American West, checking out a lot of the major players out here. January 2020, I started my property hunt, and a business partner and I found a piece near Bend, Oregon, where I live now. And we put an offer in, and the day we were supposed to sign on the dotted line, COVID reached the US, and then we couldn't come to terms anymore. And then it was just kind of chaos amidst COVID for a while. And I went to the glamping show in Denver a little over a year and a half ago and had a chance to see Shari. She was one of the keynote speakers of the glamping show, and she was giving a presentation on feasibility studies for launching glamping businesses. And I was just super impressed by her and her knowledge and kind of her reputation and how well regarded Sage was in the space. And so I had a chance to chat with Shari after the show and told her about my weird and unique skill set. And she was like, we can barely keep up with demand on the outdoor side of things. Do you want to help us spearhead the growth? And so I was like, wait, you're telling me I just got to work on all the coolest projects in the country? She's like, yeah. So I put my own aspirations to open a business on hold to kind of help her and work with a bunch of different cool projects across the country. And it's been a pretty meteoric year, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's interesting, that you bring up on the education side that you were able to specialize with an MBA program into privatized camping. And I think you mentioned glamping. Did they actually have a curriculum that was inclusive of glamping?
No, it was self-selected, so it was all independent research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I think that's great. And obviously, in an educational forum, that's a wonderful way to be introducing this industry to young up-and-comers, if you will, which sounds like a whole different podcast episode. So we'll save that for another time. But in the space, Shari, then, it sounds like you obviously saw the opportunity, the passion fueled you to want to create an offering. And so walk us through what Sage offers on a service platform, and then how you would be beneficial for, people that are either looking to get into opening up a glamp site or a hospitality site or experiential hospitality. Like, what does Sage do for them?
Absolutely. Our main two services are feasibility studies and appraisals. And appraisals are, a little bit of less of a big part of what we do for the glamping industry. We have been involved in a number of appraisals that banks have required to get financing to expand or construct, but I'll focus on the feasibility side of it, which is really where we have put in the most resources and really feel that we can help the most. So feasibility study, we have two main types of people that we've worked with. So maybe somebody who has their concept down and they know exactly what they want to do, and they need a study to either show to investors or to the bank, and they need a third-party expert to say, look, I know this is a good idea, but these people, Sage says it's a good idea too, and they've got the data and the expertise behind that, and can show that to those interested parties to help get the funding to bring their dreams alive. The other group is people who maybe don't have as much experience in camping or outdoor resorts, and they know they have a great concept and a dream, but they're not really sure how to go about it. And we will help them analyze the market or potential sites and give them advice to bring them to a point where we can recommend what type of offering we think would work in this location and what the seasonality would be, and really help show them the steps to bring that great idea and that lifelong dream to fruition. And so really it's an in-depth look at the market, what the demand generators are, what the growth is in the market, population access, how people can travel there, and then a look at the competition. What's the competitive environment? What's there now? What might be coming? Putting that into a revenue projection and then an expense projection, cost estimates, and rolling that into metrics that banks and investors will look at to see if this is a good and viable project. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And one of the things that Connor's brought to the table, you talked about our glamping report and the data initiatives. That's one of the hugest gaps in bringing some of these dreams into reality, is educating people who want to invest or people that want to finance, and actually having real data to base these decisions on. So we've invested a lot of time and effort into building these databases, which we are continuing to grow in terms of scope and geography. And that's one of the greatest things that Connor's achieved so far, but we expect way more huge things.
Connor, what kinds of things, if I were given access or able to access the data points, like what are some important things that I would see right away, and what are some other things that you would want to highlight that I should be looking for if I'm a newcomer to this industry?
Yeah, so there's kind of two lenses. One is from, if you're looking to launch your own glamping business. Each site and location is so unique, particularly like with the weather and seasonality and what unit type you're going to use. But a couple things that we see in common, we were tracking a lot of different metrics. Like, do we notice a difference in rates for sites that are, near water features or next to a major city or next to a national park, or whether the units had private bathrooms or shared bathrooms, or was there, full food and beverage and dining service available on the property? And also we tracked unit capacity, like how many guests could stay in a unit. And we wanted to see if there was any strong correlation between those. And we noticed some pretty surprising things. And that was that the data was relatively inconclusive for when we were tracking against what was the guest capacity in a unit. We didn't see a clear correlation with the more guests you can host, the higher the rates. We didn't see that. And we even tracked, is there a body of water on the property or nearby? And surprisingly, we didn't see a huge correlation with that either. And then the third thing was distance or proximity to a major city. And again, we actually didn't see a super strong correlation with that. But where we did see a very, very clear spike in rates was units that have a private bathroom, where, and fundamentally it is, if a guest is staying in the wilderness or in a wild place or on a larger property, they don't want to leave the comforts of their tents to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and have to get dressed or get a flashlight or stumble through the dark. And so we noticed that holding all other variables aside, on average, glamping units that had a private bathroom were earning about 70% more. And then also for properties that had full food and beverage service, which means that guests can get 3 prepared meals a day on site, we noticed those units on those properties were getting twice as much as properties that didn't have any food and beverage service. And there's an important caveat that typically, a site that has full food and beverage service will also have other high quality amenities. So it's not saying like, oh, if you have food and bev, you're immediately going to double your rates, but it is the correlation is so high that it's hard to ignore. And I think that makes sense, right? Because most glamping sites are in a pretty remote location. There's not a lot of great food options around or grocery stores. And what glamping allows guests to do is, all you need when you go on an RV trip or a camping trip, like you need to bring equipment or sleeping bags or an RV But when you're going glamping, it allows a guest to fly into a location across the country to go, say, visit a national park, and all they're bringing is their suitcase and a basic rental car. And if you're going on a 2 or 3 day trip, you don't have to worry about getting groceries or finding a restaurant to eat, especially in a remote location. So just having that available on site is a huge value add to your guests.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Having experienced all different facets, some would be just a slight step above primitive camping. It might be a tent with a bed in it, all the way up to all 3 meals served, bathroom right inside the same structure. My wife would definitely agree with you that she wants the bathroom right there. And when it's 30 degrees outside, I would also agree. I'd like to just stay in the same structure. Or if there's wildlife around, you don't know what's walking around at night. So, I think the food and the bathrooms are a big component. And one other thing I've noticed when people travel in is they're also unfamiliar with the surrounding area. So if they are looking for something to do outside of their glamping structure and a fire pit and some of the things you'd expect, I've noticed that sites also are starting to offer a lot of experiences tied into their property. So people also have the convenience of not having to go outside the property to find something to do or do the additional research to see what's happening. Have you noticed that also be a spike in price, or maybe even just it creates an a la carte menu where people can start to choose their adventure, and if there's costs and profits that could be associated to that? What are your thoughts on the experience side?
It really varies. And some of it is driven by what the owners, what their strengths are and what they want to offer. So I do think, we haven't gotten as much into some of the truly all inclusive resorts, because there are, on the higher end, there's not very many of them. But I do think that, offering those experiences, whether it's run by the owners of the resort or you're partnering with someone who will, pick you up and take you on the horse on the trails, is absolutely going to support higher rates. And if it doesn't support, it in a significant way, it's definitely going to support higher occupancy. Because, there's a lot of people that want to go glamp, and maybe they don't realize it till they get there that they just want to be still, and it's okay that they didn't plan anything. But I think that people that are new to it, when they're looking on the website, they're thinking, well, what am I going to do all day? And the ones that have more options to offer, especially if they're remote, and it's like, well, you can take yoga lessons, or someone can teach you how to meditate, or do an artist workshop, or there's live acoustic music at night. That's going to entice people, make them willing to pay more, and get more people to come. I think the reality is that you get there and you're just so happy to be disconnected, and you just want to stare at the stars, and maybe you write in your journal and do those kind of things. But I think that's more for somebody who's done it a lot more, and you're still gonna, if you have a 3-day stay, you're still gonna want to maybe do something. So I do think it's an important part for sure. Unless you're right outside a national park and everything you're going to do is, that's just your overnight accommodations and all of that is built in.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that. It's from a data perspective, it's hard to measure or compare experiences because most sites offer something. So how do you quantify that? So it's hard to measure, but from our personal experience, and there's two trends in hospitality that are exploding, and that is outdoor hospitality, people wanting to disconnect and be outside, and experiential hospitality, and that is to experience something really unique. And I think for your listeners, what is the story of your property, and how does that tie into the experience? And it could be the story of you as the owner, it could be the story of the land that you're on, the story of the town or the area you're in, and the history, and how can hospitality is good storytelling and connecting people to that experience. And so maybe you have Scandinavian heritage and love Finnish saunas, and so you want to have Scandinavian inspired architecture with a cold plunge and sauna experience. And how do you engage your guests with that and connect them so they're coming into this cultural and this cultural experience. And then they're going to be so much more excited about that and likely to book again, as well as, tell family and friends that they got to go check this thing out.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Connor, too, because one of the things that we tell our clients is as glamping grows and the competitive landscape grows, you need to think about what's unique about your property. It's not a long-term success solution just to put tents up on a ridge somewhere. There needs to be something unique, whether it be in your structures or your background or the experience you offer or the change in perspective that you give people that are there. I think that it will become that unique experience and aesthetic will become more and more important as the years go on in glamping.
I agree. Yeah. And it was interesting. I was reading something online and there was a study that kind of broke things down into 6 different types of travelers. Who knows? There's probably a million, but they put it in 6 categories. One was called simplicity searchers. They're just, looking to have kind of everything given to them without putting much work in to figure out how and why. They cultural purists. Connie mentioned that about, someone getting involved in the culture and there's a lot of reward to that. Social capital seekers, people looking for Instagrammable moments. Yeah.
I haven't heard that term.
Exactly. Yeah. Which there's certainly something, there's a whole business built around it as travel grammars and things like that. And I do support that. And I think it's great. It gives exposure to these properties, but those Instagrammable moments, which I think some of them are naturally just baked in. There's reward hunters, they're looking to treat themselves. They've saved up all year for their one big thing. So they want to make sure whatever they're going to do is going to pay off. The obligation meters, they feel like they have to take their family on the trip every year. So they have to sometimes switch it up. And ethical travelers. And this is where ecotourism is coming in big, yeah. I see. And in a lot of the glamp site owners that I've spoken with on the podcast, they're just, when I visited their properties, it usually was an evolution in how they got to the point where they were able to offer cultural educational tours or activities on site. Like they had to get something started to start their business. What are your thoughts on kind of the methodical process of the planning stages to launching with something, and then Shari, to your point, having a growth mindset where, okay, in year 1, I'm going to do this, but in year 2, I plan to do this. In year 3, I plan to do this, because being able to try and do it all at once actually could be a cause for implosion if you're just not able to sustain it.
Yeah, I think that's a really relevant question. And I love your breakdown of the traveler types, by the way.
Wasn't mine, but it was something I saw online. A lot of them were focused on glamping or experiential outdoor hospitality, which was really fun for me to see that, wow, every single one of these categories fits right into what we're talking about.
No, we definitely believe strongly in proof of concept, and especially in an environment where securing capital for your full dream is difficult. So getting a lender or investor to come on board and say they're going to fund 50 glamping units that cost $80,000 each. That's a big ask. So, and even on a smaller scale, it can be a big ask if you don't have a background in it. So, being able to come up with a kind of a minimum viable concept, not only to prove to the people that you're seeking expansion capital from, but for yourself. See how this goes. Are the target customers really the ones that you had in mind? Is that who's showing up? Maybe you have a couple different unit types that you'd been considering, and you see which ones are most popular, how your rates really perform to the projections. I think that often we look at a lot of projects that have, up to 3 phases. And the great thing about starting smaller is that you can reevaluate your plan as you go. Now, minimum viable product can be hard, though, because if you've got to build in central amenities and you're somewhere where you don't need, where there's not really food and beverage options, you really need to make that investment or find a way to outsource some of that stuff, which is a good solution too. But yeah, it's there are some big players who can kind of go all in, and that can make sense for the right location. But more often than not, a phased proof of concept approach is, I think, really the smartest. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm guessing that most of your listeners are, the entrepreneurs, might be bootstrapping this, probably don't have, millions of dollars sitting around. And I could say probably two of our favorite clients, Walden Retreats in Austin, Texas, and actually Blake Smith went to my MBA program and was a big mentor for me. But he's running a phenomenal business out of Austin. And then Bignall Dutson at Open Sky, who's also running an amazing glamping concept outside of Zion. And they both started with 2 or 3 units on their property. Their phase one was just 2 or 3 units, and they were super high quality. Really, really like nailed those first 2-3 units. And then once they had a year or two of operating history under their belt, showing strong revenue and rates and occupancy, then they, when they got an appraisal through Shari, and then applied for construction loans for their expansions and expanded up to 10, 12 units. And then they started adding on-site dining and an events venue and a pool and more programming. And, early on getting, $300 to $400 a night. And now those rates are, $500 to $800 a night. And that's just a really good example of a way that you can bootstrap it and kind of mitigate your risk and start and nail the first concept and then prove that. And then it's going to be way easier to raise bank lending or private investment.
Yeah, and it's we live in a society now where we're so expecting of everything right now because there's so many things at our fingertips. And what I'm hearing from you and what I've heard from others, and I agree with, is that you really need to have a long-term vision in place and also the patience and tolerance to move through that methodically. And Shari, to your point, I think it is a test up front. There's a dream and maybe that might not make sense. And so maybe start smaller, see how you feel about it. And then again, just take the time to grow as you see fit and also be able to react to how the world's changing. Connor, you mentioned that when you got into this, there was a dream and then COVID hit and you were able to pivot and change. And so I think the same is probably true for people that we're past COVID, we're still up and operating, but we're trying to see what's trending or what's popular or what new structure got invented, just to have the flexibility and open-mindedness to have a plan, but then make a shift if you want to. Do you, as Sage, tend to stick with your clients? So the feasibility studies and a lot of things that happen up front are kind of to get people off and running, but then are there options for people, say they have a glamp site up and running and they might have used you to help get started, and 3-4 years down the road, they're like, oh, okay, so we're ready to grow. Can you guys help us strategize on some of that?
Yeah, they've become some of my very good friends, as a matter of fact. So going back to 2018, I have quite a few that we continue to talk, whether it's about, their current project that we started with or another one, or they're partnering with someone else on something else. So, we try to stay in our lanes as feasibility consultants and market study consultants. But we have learned a lot in the industry. We make a very strong effort to connect our clients to other professionals in the industry that can help them through other parts of, development, management, design, et cetera. And we also make a point to do our best to follow up and see how things are going, because we always want to learn from what their experiences are as well. And did things turn out the way that we thought they would, and what went well, what went wrong. But it's all sounds like, a number of years have passed since it started, but it's going super fast. So it's all still very new. We have quite a few clients that are still in their, startup phases that we'll know more once they've gotten further along. But yeah, it's calls on Saturdays and Sundays because we've all become friends. But that is what I love about this industry. It is amazing, good people. I continue to be floored by all the wonderful people that I've met. So.
Yeah, and I could add to that. We having like an open communication with our past clients and checking in with them. Like some of them have reached out to us multiple times for study revisions or for a phase 3 expansion. And so that definitely happens. But then there's an awesome kind of free learning exchange that happens with our clients where they call us and give us the updates on their business, things that are going really well, things that aren't going as well as they planned. I think actually to like Open Sky and Walden Retreats, like in the past month, I sent them both like an SEO consultant that we're working with at Sage, as well as a new food service business that is bringing like high quality food options to, remote high scale resorts. So like sending contacts to them, be like, hey, this might be able to help with your next growth stage. And then we can check in with them and find out like, hey, how's the events venue going? Like, is it getting as much revenue as we expected? Is the demand there? And we get a really important feedback loop from like what is happening boots on the ground in the market.
Yeah, I think that follow-up, and I'm so glad to hear that you do that, is so important because it provides hope, for someone that has that long-term vision. Like, is anybody else doing this? What's going on with them? And it's a confidence boost when you get to find out that people have tried it and they're realizing successes, or they're ran into challenges that forced them to go a different direction, but they were able to overcome it, especially with some support services like Sage. And Connor, getting outside of the U.S., you mentioned the Serengeti. It sounds like you've been to some pretty fantastic places. So what would be some of your favorite places that you visited globally, and why? And then the second part of that question would be is, how do you see the U.S. Compared to the rest of the globe when it comes to glamping?
Yeah. Oh, fun question. One of my favorites was this Namibian desert glamping that was up. It was up in the hills of the Namibian desert, and it looked out. So it was these really cool tents, kind of scattered about this hillside, and then they just looked out over the sweeping desert near like the Sassafras Dunes, and that was a really special one that not many people have heard about. And I got to see these Rwandan bungalows being built on this like rainforest hillside that looked out over Lake Kivu in the DRC, which was really special. And then in the US, probably one of the coolest site visits I got to do this last year was to go see Open Sky, which is right outside Zion. It's just like an unbelievable horseshoe canyon property. And if you walk up to the rimrock edge, you can see all the giant monoliths like within Zion. It's just stunning. As far as the U.S. market compared to the rest of the world, we definitely got a late start compared to Africa, but we are making up speed quickly. I think the COVID drastically expedited the pace of outdoor hospitality's growth. And what we've seen in speaking with a lot of our clients is we've gotten a lot of interest from, people that were in the hotel or other asset classes of real estate that are a bit more institutional, that are reaching out to us and getting, asking us for advice about getting into the space. And I think there's a lot of hesitancy, especially with like recession worries that, traditional things like hotels or multifamily or even offices, people that were in these other asset classes are like, okay, where can we put our money that seems like a safe bet? And I think outdoor hospitality is becoming more and more of a viable option. And I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. So I think, all growth, like a rising tide lifts all boats, both for the entrepreneurs as well as the, larger players getting into the space.
Yeah, I've read a few studies, and it always kind of shifts a little bit, but one said by 2030, they anticipate $5.94 billion to be spent in the glamping sector, which seems like a big number. And then you look at how much money is spent in travel, which would projected be 1.13 trillion. And then you realize, wow, like glamping is actually a very small percentage. I actually look at that as exciting though, because there's so much ground to gain. And I think part of that's raising awareness, both not only for the consumer, but also for things like financial institutions that can help bring some of these dreams to reality. And your feasibility studies obviously do a lot of that work. What's been your take as far as how financial institutions are responding to these requests? And also, is there a certain type of loan that seems to be working better than another?
That's a good question. So there are a few banks that are specializing in outdoor resort segment, thank goodness. And they've established groups that specialize in outdoor resort lending. And those groups have done a really good job educating themselves on the industry. We were recently invited to one of those banks to speak to their executive staff on our views of both glamping and RV resorts, just to help give them some insight and really truly understand it better. And it's really encouraging to see that there are banks doing that and that have a desire to be educated about it rather than just not understanding it and saying no. But I think that they're still kind of few and far between, is the hard part. And I also think that, we're lucky there's not a lot of appraisers that do what we do. But because some of these banks are hiring appraisers that don't have a lot of experience in it, unfortunately, we're hearing of, some deals that aren't going through because, projects that we thought were really solid, somebody else did the appraisal on, and just, I think it was just a lack of true understanding of the product type and how to compare it properly to others. So it's going to get better, and it is getting better. But it's hard to sometimes educate your local bank, or even you've got a national bank and a lender you like working with, but they haven't done anything in the space, and it gets difficult. So, but people who have strong community banking relationships, a lot of times those smaller banks that want the investment in their community and believe in it, they will go out of their way to understand it and talk to their higher ups and make it happen.
Yeah, and to add on that, probably 9 out of 10 loan officers or banks that you approach about lending against a glamping project might have no idea what you're talking about and will have never written up a loan for an asset class even remotely resembling that. So there's a lot of education that still needs to happen, and that's probably the biggest thing that we're working on. And I think, you were mentioning the why at the beginning of the show, and why it is that we do what we do. And our goal, or my personal mission, as well as kind of the mission of Sage, is to get as many people outside and having a really authentic experience connecting with nature and loved ones and themselves as we can. We don't do that directly. We help other people do that. And so there's so little data available, and there's even terms and definitions is something that is kind of poorly understood, but we've been working really closely with KOA, with the Glamping report, and other reports that we're basically looking to publish and make available kind of as much data and clarification that is substantiating this market and legitimizing it, so that's publicly available. So people who are working on launching their products, they can reference these things and take them to the bank or to lenders and say, hey, this is what the average glamping business is making in the US or in my state. This is what they're making for this unit type with these types of bathrooms. And we're trying to kind of make that available to elevate the whole industry and pave the way for more financing, whether through private investors or banks, pave the way for more glamping operators and owners to get that investment.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's also the reason why I do this podcast and write the blog. It's to raise awareness, because I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's so new. And from a bank's perspective, they're all about risk.
Yeah.
And so if it's not even an understood word yet, it's kind of hard to write a loan against it. But I think that education is crucial. Are there any other things you think that could be happening in the glamping industry that maybe could be helping connect Glamp site owners, because it's a very supportive network, Sherry, as you said. Yes, they're competitors, but quite frankly, at this point, I think they're all supporters because they really just want everybody to succeed because everybody else's success, Connor, to your point, the tide rises, all the ships rise as well. What isn't out there? Have you ever thought about what it'd be nice if we had this because this would really help us do this?
Well, I think this is forming, but investment groups that specialize in this industry. We know a few people that are either doing it or putting it together. I think that that's going to help. And that's, private capital. It's not just some random private capital group that invests in all things, but, they're looking at outdoor hospitality specifically. And the more that continues to happen, the more opportunities will be available. I think one of the things that we try to do ad hoc that we're trying to put a little more kind of organization around is just being a connector. We're busy writing feasibility studies, so it's not our main mission, but we found ourselves in that position of, wait, we know somebody who has land and they want to do glamping, but they don't want to operate it. But we know some people who have a dream to operate it and unique skills to do that. And we actually know somebody who doesn't really want to do much, but they do want to put their money there and really, so all that's happening very ad hoc in the industry now. And I think podcasts like these and other industry forums like the American Glamping Association, they help connect people. But sometimes it's just kind of the luck of, I talked to this person last week and someone brought up this need this week. And that's one of the things that Connor's great at is finding those fits between people. But the more that can be focused on and formalized, I think it's going to help everyone in the industry for sure.
Glamping is, I've heard a couple owners or people chatting with us about saturation in the market, and we're nowhere near market saturation. And I've chatted with a couple glamping owners who are telling us about the experience that they wanted to run on their property. And they were like, hey, we're going to need to have you sign an NDA before we tell you about the experiences that we're going to offer on our property. And I was like, you're going to make a website, right? That's going to be public information. And I was like, listen, start looking at other glamping businesses as your friends and as people that can help you, and you can share information and tips and trips. Like, the chances of you pulling from the same customer base, even if you're, 10 minutes away from each other, is so low. The amount of glamping accommodation available compared to traditional hotel or camping sites, it's like 1% of 1% of 1%. It's such a small amount. So I would just encourage your listeners to, if there's another operator in your space or even in another state, reach out to them and befriend them and pop the hood and talk about what you're struggling with and what's going well, because you have a lot more to gain from helping people. And I think most people have that attitude. Yeah. I think that's what's so fun and special about this industry, is that people are willing to help each other. There's not a lot of secrecy or trying to edge people out. So I would just encourage people to keep doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think most of them do feel that. And sometimes running a ranch, running a glamping outfit, there's only so much time in the day. And so I feel like if there's more opportunities that create access points for people with the minimal amount of barriers, I think that communication will definitely be on the uptick. So when you guys aren't working, you're hopefully taking a vacation at some point. Shari, I'll start with you. What's your dream vacation? Where have you not been that you are dying to go to at some point?
I'll just tell you where I just went. How's that sound? Because I'm still reminiscing about that. So I went to Aruba for the first time for my 25th wedding anniversary, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And I call myself an aging action sports junkie. Aging being the key word, because I can't necessarily do everything that I wanted to do in the past. But Aruba has no glamping, by the way, and it is prime for it. Because I looked anywhere I go, I try to experience as many as I can. But the blue waters were amazing. So there was snorkeling, sailing, quiet beach time, dinners on the beach, ATVing, cave pool jumping. And I made Connor proud because I took a kite surfing lesson, and he's a big kite surfer. Learning how to move that kite's a lot harder than I thought, so I'm going to need more lessons. But but I love it all. I love the ocean. I love the mountains. I live on a lake. I want to experience it all, and I do have to remind myself that doing nothing is a good thing too. I think we all need to remind ourselves of that. So I tried to fit a lot of that in as well.
Sounds amazing. Connor, what about you?
A couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to do snowshoe out to some yurts on Paulina Lake in Bend, and we just gotten like 2 feet of snow. And it was a really simple, like basic yurt, but there was only 2 around there, and there was like nobody there. So like winter glamping is a very hard thing to pull off, but we got to do that and experience it, and it was really a magical glamping experience, and of like what's left or what's coming up. Probably like my favorite place in the world. I don't know, there's a lot, but I really love Norway and the fjords up there. And so if I could find some glamping in Norway overlooking the fjords, that would be pretty high on the list, I would say.
Yeah, there was a show on Apple. Eugene Levy is hosting it, called The Reluctant Traveler, and I believe they went to Norway. And stayed in some glamping units. That even that term in and of itself is really kind of not defined. I tried to do it on the website, but there's certainly a lot of structures like RVs, for instance. Like, is it glamping? Is it not? But I feel like if it's getting people outside and they're disconnecting from their day-to-day stresses and finding new ways to connect with each other, it's good all around, whatever kind of structure there's.
Absolutely.
How about you, Bobby?
Every trip I take is great, but the last place I would say that was just mind-blowing was Iceland. And it's just because it felt like you're on a different planet in some of those places. So scenic, definitely a challenging environment to, I think, be in for the long haul. But I also think that fuels what the Icelanders were telling me is their dark humor, because you have to have it to get through some of the winters there. I'm originally from Minnesota, so I'm well-versed in the cold. My wife, however, enjoys very warm weather. So whenever I mix in a colder vacation, I always have to offset it the next time with a warmer location. So I think the next one we're looking at is Greece. Haven't been, again, beautiful architecture, but by the ocean, and so much rich history. And I love the opportunity to learn culture. I love to learn about not only the structures I'm around and what I'm doing, but how did this all happen thousands of years ago? So anything I can ever do to immerse myself in that is a place I definitely want to visit, which is anywhere on the planet. So everything's open.
Absolutely.
Well, Connor and Shari, thank you so much for joining me today. I love what you're doing. I'm looking forward to watching Sage evolve, hopefully partnering with you down the road when it's time to maybe open my own Glamptuary. But keep doing what you're doing, and looking forward to staying in touch with you.
We're honored to be here, and thanks for the opportunity, Bobby.
Yeah, we love it. Keep doing what you're doing. You're helping the people. So thanks, Bobby. Yeah, we appreciate the chance to be on here with you. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode, and I truly hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Shari and Connor. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're passionate about the experiential outdoor hospitality industry, and they're in a great position to help those that are thinking about getting started, or those that have been doing it for a while and are thinking about expanding and building their current business. If you'd like to reach out to them, you can do so via their website, which is www.sageoutdooradvisory.com. That is www.sageoutdooradvisory.com. And if you'd like to follow us, you can do so on our website, which is www.glamptuary.com. Again, that is www.glamptuary.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you down the trail.